we cutting here?
Cheddar.
Beautiful.
20 kilos.
Welcome back to the advisory deck, and we are here in Netley in South Australia this morning having a conversation with Stephen Heaney, who is the founder and managing director of Australia's Finest. Before I introduce Stephen, James McGill from Chatham Capital. How are you, James?
I'm good, Troy, thank you.
Good, welcome. We're really delighted to have a conversation with Stephen today. It's such an interesting and innovative business to talk a little bit about how he's solving a problem, filling a gap, building a brand, and bringing some innovation to a space that is in need of it. Stephen, thanks so much for having us along here today.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell us just quickly, in sort of a minute or so, about Australia's Finest? I guess where it came from, the idea, and your background coming into it.
Oh, look, I just, obviously my background is with cheese, and in knowing the supermarket market, there was a couple of opportunities probably a couple of years ago where they would ask me if I could produce a Persian feta, which I said fantastic. So with my contacts, I actually went out and looked for a great Persian feta, and Australia's Finest name actually came up because I thought, how can it sell on the shelf with a no brand? So, and looking at the export opportunities, I thought, look, that's fantastic to have a great name to be on the shelf compared to all the other competitors, because it seems like it makes sense for a retailer, consumer.
So Australia's Finest, let me see if I understand this correctly, Stephen. I've spent some time working with you for a period of time. What you're building with Australia's Finest is, let's call it an umbrella brand for the sake of another term, bringing in the producers, smaller producers of different cheese, cracker, paste type products, and bringing them in underneath this brand, and working with a national distribution network to create a scale mechanism for these smaller guys who don't necessarily have brand recognition, don't necessarily have the paths to consumer market, and aggregating them together to really create something where no matter what I buy, if it's got Australia's Finest on it, I can trust in the quality of that, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So I looked at it, there was a lot of producers only can work on a sort of a state level, and since my model was with the national distribution, I thought a great opportunity where I could brand the Australia's Finest product and showcase their products in the brand, and always promote them as the producer as well. So yeah, it is like an umbrella brand, and it sort of gives the national consumer on that national level a bit more of a sort of like a consumer choice product.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking off camera, James, about the terms Australia's Finest. There's that comfort and familiarity with it immediately, isn't it?
There is, and I wouldn't mind just backing up to your first question. And Stephen, you made it sound almost like when you were asked about the Persian cheese that it was almost an off-the-cuff, casual kind of process you went through. But the reality is, from what you were saying before, you did a lot of market research.
Yep.
You did a lot of analysis. You do the kind of work and market research that Jason from Square Holes would love to hear people do in terms of detailed, methodical, desk-based, but also literally in a supermarket, looking at shelf space, looking at these sort of things. How important do you think that was to getting from where you started, one product, taking an opportunity, to literally, we'll get Troy to hold you right. You've got a number of different products now. How important is that market research, and do you keep on doing it now?
Oh, look, the market research, in previous, before the Persian feta was, I did a lot of research in supermarkets, consumer purchase, buy, and I think it all comes back from, looking at your eclipse as all problem to solution. And, with these brand names being around for over 20 years, I actually spoke to a lot of international producers, and I said, how long does it take for your brand to really start going in different countries? So I know some benchmarks, and actually there's one well-known producer which they said to me it took about 2.5 years in Germany for their product to go, and it's one of the top selling countries. And for me, looking at things going, well, okay, gives me some benchmarks where's the end game, or when, how long it's going to take. But especially with IP, the name around it, and protecting it for the export market and the local market, I needed to get up to retail shops, and that's how that was the strategy behind it. So.
It's rare to hear people talk about a lot of research and also having the patience to understand that it is a long game. We had a conversation with another on the advisory deck recently about that long-term nature. It isn't 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Like Mick Sanders at Moo, it's been 16 years for them, and they're still working things out. They're still having issues. I'm guessing every company knows that nothing is smooth sailing. But people often ignore that as startup founders who think it's going to be fantastic and they'll be a $1 billion company in a year or so. For you, it was a lot more, I guess, a start of you want this to be a long-term game, right? And the branding was around how do I take a brand that's new, where you choose words that are familiar. How do you go and look at an export market? Will you choose words that have strength, especially in the food game, which is Australia? What's next for you in terms of pivotal moments, or what maybe in the past year or so? Has there been a pivotal moment where you've gone, sometimes you just have to make stuff up as you go along, but was there a moment, or do you think there'll be a moment where you'll break through to the next level? There'll be something that happens that goes, now you're at the point where you feel like you're beyond a startup or an emerging company and you're really kicking big goals. How does that look for you?
Well, just looking at the progress in every business, even benchmarks in new businesses. This is my 3rd year starting this financial year, and looking at I'm thinking the relationships I've made in the business world, and especially with the national retailer, it takes time. There's so much to learn, but as you learn more and you gain trust, they give you a little bit more. And the important thing is that I'm always developing products which is the simplicity of the actual the operation itself, without going out and redesigning something, but looking at the same footprint, what a lot of retailers are selling well in a different space, or looking at actual data to actually choose my products, and it's like if I have a conversation with someone, I know what they're thinking because they know it's a great line. You know what I mean? I know what they're looking at. Yeah. I know, it's all about sales to them. So.
Nando Focaretta said a similar thing to us when we had a chat to him recently. He said, it's not about what I think, it's not about what I love, it's what's the market tell me. And one of the things that's been so impressive for me about the way you approach this, Stephen, is you've looked at those lines, you've looked at the hard data of, I know these kind of products will move at this kind of rate if we get the price point right, if we get the distribution right, if we get the branding right as well. And I know that will make you X amount of dollars. And if I can provide it to you at a point that, is sustainable for us but saves you money, that's a no-brainer for a reseller partner, right? So I think your focus on not only products which really delight consumers in terms of the quality and supporting small local organisations that make them, but making sure that your distribution and reseller partners go, I can see why we should have you in the tent. I can see why this would be a valuable choice for us. And probably also without even necessarily fracturing other elements of their sort of supply chains, just providing some solutions bit by bit, yeah?
And it's interesting, like even with national retailer now, a lot of these distributors and producers have been in there for a long time, and even though they think my sales are a small number, I'm going, well, the only way is to go up. Do you know what I mean? So why would if you look at the algorithm here, in 20 years' time I'll be like them. If you actually look at it. But it's me. And a really interesting point was with my market research. I actually employed about 4 school mums because they're the target market, right? And it's fantastic because they help me doing the product development and the look and feel, and they're very particular about things. So the staff are very key to me at the moment, and it's easy because they actually tell me what they would buy and look and feel as well. So
there's an art.
That's an element now.
There's an art and a science to building a business, and you've spoken a lot about the science and the market research, and you've just touched on the art and finding the right people to help you. And if it's go to your target market and ask them what do they like. What do they want that product market fit piece, right? I was thinking before we hosted a session earlier this year that Stephen Trigg and Marty Palmer spoke at, and this was sort of how do you survive and thrive through COVID, and a lot of that was around relationships and the value of relationships. Mick from Moo spoke about the same thing again. You know, he knows if he's got a problem at 2 o'clock in the morning, he can call someone that might be a competitor, but the relationship is there where he can call them because they'll work together, and they'll work to make a problem go away at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a relationship piece. You've touched on that as well. We're doing a survey a bit later on this year with people like yourself to find out what's made them successful, and I think this theme of relationships and understanding your customers and product market fit, that has to be an ongoing, everlasting passion. Without that, you can get very consumed by what you're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to help you or that people want to buy what you want to buy. So I think themes that develop out of these conversations. We've spoken about some of the positive things. Great market research, now a suite of products coming on and good relationships with other people, distribution and partners and suppliers and so forth. What hasn't gone to plan in the last 3 years? What are the things you've come across and thought, I never thought I'd deal with that issue, and then how did you actually deal with that issue?
Oh look, the business model itself and then the cost model was me working off a sort of a laptop base where looking at the efficiencies and the resources of, for example, other cheese makers or people in a process environment. So I actually firstly started by contracting packing out because they've got their insurance, they've got their site, they've got their electricity, it's all the same. And it gave them extra work as well. So, but there was a time, I'd say probably early last year, so June, July, had some product quality issues. And I made a call. I actually made a call and recalled it myself. It's really obviously hurt because I couldn't tarnish what I was doing. So I had to actually move quickly and brought the operation in-house, and learned it very quickly, brought on a bit of a team and learned from scratch. So in the last sort of, I'd say July to December was really hard work. And this year now we're getting on some contract work. We're starting to we've got the blueprint, like everything, the hard work's done. We're sort of starting, and I'm more control as well. So I can watch my product go from start to finish.
Would you have been able to start with that business model day one? I mean, you would have had to have more, I guess, more cash to literally find premises, pay people, get your insurance. Could you have started, even though it's where you've ended up, which gives you more control, could you have started there on day one?
No, I don't think so, because my model was, playing in that space with, let's say, the competition or the big players in that space. They've been there for years, and I'm just looking at it and I'm going, if I can crack this, it's a lot of people can't, they pull out, right? And and I'd say the key thing, just going back, is everything I do, we actually call the customers. We get data and we actually call the customers and we find out what they're thinking. So with a shoestring budget, people didn't know who we were, so we branded our boxes, right? And then we thought, let's put a brochure in there, and everyone started buying more stuff. You know what I mean? So the simplicity of just an A4 piece of paper.
Sounds so simple.
I track things on simple data like customer numbers, how many boxes they're buying, and how do the problems had a bit more. You know what I mean? But with this, I know it's a bit strange with the model. I'm using the actual distributors' portals to communicate my message. Plus, I'm building my own database on the side as a protection thing. So, I'm using their infrastructure to promote my products. So,
which they're happy to do because you're solving a problem for them. You're adding value to them as well, and so look, if this data can help you help us better, happy days. And I think it's such a great example of some of the simplest things that marketing and sales one-on-one stuff that people just brush away so quickly. And if I've got an existing customer who's about to open that box, I should let them know the other things that we actually could sell to them as well, right?
Oh, exactly. And it's like it's the simple stuff, the simplicity of things. Sometimes you go back to basics.
So I think it sure does.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things why you've built this great this fledgling but growing business on smart data and partnerships, you're also thinking laterally, employing people who represent your target market, but also thinking about interesting and slightly different distribution methods, putting product in front of people's noses in places that make sense but just isn't really being done. Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on an example of how you're going about doing that.
Oh, look, just trying to, in South Australia, obviously do a lot of modelling, and we try things out in a few stores so we can see if it sells, and then we can be confident to go to the national market. But it's more of looking at outside the square of going, what other opportunities what people aren't doing? Because just an example, the bottle shop model with packs.
So these are hanging on shelves in bottle shops, yes?
Yeah, we're doing some trials at the moment with
Yeah,
Thirsty
okay.
Camels and in bottle shops.
Cheese and crackers. Or
Yeah,
you
look,
other ones.
Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Easy. Why isn't anybody else doing it? No?
Well, that's right, and we've actually had some great sales in the last. We've only put it out probably about 8 weeks ago, and there's more. And you can tell the customers going, "Oh, it'll be fantastic. This is a value add." Do you know what I mean? The other key to it is I actually tweaked it a little bit where we have got a breed, but a lot of people love a breed.
Yeah.
But I actually put a Persian feather in there because the product life of that product is 6 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm trying to say the Persian feather is the new breed because it's fantastic when you eat it on a cracker, right? But it promotes that brand as well, and Persian feather. But ticking a box like that is really key because these guys don't want something that's going to go to date quickly.
Yes.
So there's little elements on, it's important.
And the product's not sitting in the fridge, right? So it's not. Is it literally on a stand next to the cash register? Is that how?
It's in a little. There's like a little fridges next to the cash register when they walk in. So it's like, obviously they've got the chips and the salami, but now they're starting to sort of branch out and they've got their own space.
So it is fridge space.
It is fridge space.
But it's their fridge space. You're not supplying the fridge.
No.
So it's taking up space that otherwise would have bottles in it.
Well, that was a challenge, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I say I don't have any space.
But it is a bottle shop, they have fridges.
Yeah, but the complementary of the thing is it's a customer driven, right? And if you look at it, you go, well, I mean, it makes sense, but you need to run it so it shows that it's happening.
So is that again back to relationships? Bottle shops weren't your target market in terms of distribution, right? It's a new area for you. Or how did the conversation go with a bottle shop if it's part of Thirsty Camel? They're a national chain, so they like to do things the same way. How long did it take you to get your product that was brand new into their shelf space that was taking out a white wine or a champagne or something else?
Yeah, so look, it took about 10 weeks.
Okay.
I actually looked at this probably about 5 years ago through BWS, right? And I'm looking at, and some of the information is the cost model for the worst cost model is actually a bit higher. They actually ask more margins. Bottle shops did all ambient, right? Deliveries. So, these little barriers, which I'm working out with another national retailer because a lot of them are linked to the supermarkets next door as well.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So we're looking at that leverage of, just trying to work out how can we, change the footprint because someone's always happy to walk down the road with a box. It's a value add. But looking at it itself, it's fast paced. You then go, grab and go. New pops.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating business model, hey?
It is, and I think it just shows the benefit of knowing an industry really well. And you started this because you were in the industry already. You had the insights, you had the relationships, and through that you could see an opportunity that others hadn't seen or weren't in the position to take. Doesn't matter why. But I think that shows the benefit of knowing. So you spent a number of years figuring this out before you took the leap. When you take the leap, no matter what you do, you still have to then be flexible with your business model to go, well, we'll start here, but back yourself to go, if that's not working, I've got to go and do something else and then do something else. And before you know it, you're 3 years in, you've got a range of products, but you still haven't lost sight of the value of market research, of relationships, and building what you want to be, which is, without being silly about it, you want to build a global brand. That's where you started, and that's whether it takes 3 years, 4 years, 5 or whatever.
And all the stuff around it is how to get there.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And it doesn't have to be limited to food products either. You know what I mean? So it's really for that export opportunity for Australian producers because I suppose the old, it sounds a bit old school, but the old Australian logo or people looking into Australian market to look for exporting products, it's all very clunky. It's very old. Do you know what I mean? And it's like it needs a bit of a facelift, but it needs to be. I've got some Australia's finest handbook.com.au. Looking at it, the funnel to promote these Australian products.
It's funny, the most successful Australian, I think I'm right in saying this, the most successful Australian wine export product is that Yellowtail,
That's right.
which is an okay wine. They don't sell too much of it in Australia. It was designed for the export market, and it had a brand that people associated with Australia straight away. It's at a price point and distribution point that wasn't competing with Grange or whatever else. Could there be an Australia's finest Sauvignon Blanc, the red wine, or whatever else? So you're not limiting yourself, right?
No, that's what it's for.
You build a brand, and then the products that's underneath that, whatever it is, because you've got the brand, the relationships, the distribution channels, and it's going to be food and wine and whatever. Yeah, it's a very smart strategy.
All on the back of a humble little jar of Persian feta, hey? Stephen, I think, what you're doing is so impressive. I think the data-driven decision making, I think the, really working hard to solve problems with the relationships in the distribution network that you've spent many, many years in, and I know you're bootstrapping your way to this as well, and the stresses that come at midnight when you've got a quality issue that bubbles up, or you've got a supply issue that bubbles up as well. But staying laser focused on how can we work with more great suppliers to solve more problems, both for consumers with great quality products at the places they want to buy them, and the resellers of those as well. That collaborative mindset, I think this is a brand to keep a really close eye on, and I think it's going to go places. So congratulations and thank you to you for sharing a bit of your story with us. If you want to check out Australia's Finest, there's the details. You're on the Facebook and Instagram. Yep, fantastic.
It's official Australia's Finest, and there's Australia's Finest products.
Beautiful. And if you're in a thirsty camel, you can probably pick yourself up a pack of some terrific, and the crackers are amazing, and the chocolates, I've got to tell you.
And they'll be at the IGA soon, the independence.
IGAs? Fantastic, excellent. James, great conversation, fascinating insights for leaders as always, and relevant to all kinds of industries. Ladies and gents, if you'd like to join us on the advisory deck, just get in touch. James and I can come out and visit you. We've covered yogurt, we've covered gin, now we're in the cheese and crackers and chocolates. I'm not sure where we go next, James.
Got to be wine, surely.
Back to wine again. Stephen, thanks again, and thanks so much for joining us on the advisory deck.